Welcome, welcome, welcome. My name is Jay Rosenthal. I'm the co-founder of Cultivated Media, the host of this program, which is called Cultivated Live. And since we launched almost exactly a year ago, our goal at Cultivated has been to be cannabis industry first, providing you with the most important, insightful, useful, and timely information every single day. We do that through our daily newsletter, which is Cultivated Daily, which you can find at cultivated.news. We do that through this daily live stream, which is Cultivated Live. So please follow us on LinkedIn, subscribe to us on YouTube, and get our newsletter in your inbox every single day. How to do that is linked below, but the easiest way is to go to cultivated.news. It's why I wear this hat. Today, we are pleased, Jeremy and I. Jeremy's my co-founder, he's also our editor-in-chief. We do this thing on Wednesdays. Today, we are joined by Jim Higdon. He is the co-founder of Cornbread Hemp and a native, I've learned today, of Lebanon, Kentucky. We'll go into his bio, and I say Kentucky because it comes up what he's going to tell us about the basketball game last night. But Jim, welcome. Jeremy, welcome. Looking forward to this conversation. Yeah. Jim, before we dive in to Cornbread and what's going on, give us a little bit about your background because it is a interesting route to where you are today.
Sure. So, everyone in the cannabis industry, the hemp industry, comes from a different background because, we've all come from somewhere else. I started as a journalist, a book author. My hometown in Lebanon, Kentucky, was the headquarters of what the federal government said was the largest domestic marijuana syndicate in American history, known as the Cornbread Mafia. It was something that sort of colored my whole upbringing, adolescence, high school years. And it was a story I wanted to tell when I went off to become a writer, and I wanted to tell stories. I had this story in my pocket. It's like, this is a big story that people need to know about and has never been told. But didn't have a way to like get that story because the people who were involved would never talk about it. Like the allure, like the mystique of the Cornbread Mafia stories that no one would talk about it. I mean, when the federal government busted 70 men from central Kentucky over the course of 5 years between 85 to 89, they arrested 70 men on 30 farms in 10 states with what the government said was 200 tons of cannabis. Of these 70 men that were busted, none of them talked in exchange for a lesser sentence. So the government had this RICO case against this whole group, but had no witness to point the finger on the stand to say who the leaders of that group were, because the 70 men that they knew were involved, none of them would talk. And so in the summer of 1989, federal prosecutors held a press conference in Louisville, Kentucky, where they laid out this case that they thought we were going to take to a courtroom, but because they had no witnesses, they just laid it out to the press and like gave the prosecution to the press with no opportunity for anyone to defend themselves. And in the course of that press conference, called this group the Cornbread Mafia, and that's what stuck and what like lent notoriety to my hometown again, which had been notorious for alcohol and drinking and underage shenanigans, underage drinking, music stuff. Going back to the 60s. So just added another layer of notoriety to my hometown. And it wasn't until I went to the Columbia Journalism School in New York that I really got the tool kit, like the skill set necessary to dig that out, which is like digging through government records, getting narrative from court documents, interviewing people who don't want to be interviewed, like that, what that process is like. And I was able to take those skills back home and with a book contract, dig it up and report the story out. And it took a little longer than I anticipated. It was supposed to be a 18-month, 2-year project, ended up taking 6 years. Put a giant hole in my resume, like what had I been doing? So had to get through it and came out the other side with, what's now considered to be, a fundamental nonfiction account of not just the history of cannabis in Kentucky, but really like how the drug war over time affected the microcosm of a specific community. I mean, the one cult, like the aspect of Cornbread Mafia that's sort of distinct and different from most drug war stories is that of these 70 men that we're talking about, 100% of them were white country. All but one of them were raised Catholic, which is another sort of like layer of cultural interest on top of all that. But that's sort of, like why this story is interesting and superlative and worth, basing a career on. And the success of that book led me into a journalism career. It's where I met Jeremy the first time, mixing it up on the platform formerly known as Twitter. while covering the 2018 Farm Bill relative to hemp for Politico, I was reporting in Kentucky and seeing the hemp crop come in, and really started seeing like, oh, this is a real thing, and it's not just hemp fiber. This is hemp flower, and folks are growing and making product that, this is a real thing in Kentucky. And like, we really turned the page. The whole period of reporting the book, never thought that outdoor cannabis cultivation would be legal in Kentucky anytime soon, but the hemp market really caught everyone by surprise. And I was in a position reporting on it and made me realize that the train was leaving. And if I wanted to get out of the bleachers and into the game, I had one shot. And it was right then. And at that very moment, my first cousin, Eric Zipperly, who has an MBA and a marketing background, was quit a job in Nashville, moved back home, and he was like, I don't know what I'm doing with my life, but I'm never going to have another boss again. And I was like, I know what you're doing. We're going to do this.
I got an idea.
Yeah.
And he was like, and Eric, his classmate in his MBA program, was one of the co-founders of Alani Nutrition and of Prime Energy. And so he had a front row seat on what that build out of that company was like. And so with, my knowledge of the industry and his knowledge of standing up a CPG e-commerce company, we went to work and didn't pay ourselves for the first 2 years, and built a brand in Kentucky based on my story of the Cornbread Mafia, or Cornbread Hemp. And that's where, the foundation of the brand. And since then, we've acquired a processor to become vertically integrated. We're working with our exclusive farming partners now to grow our own genetics. We're certified organic from seed to finished product, and we're employing over 50 people in our new facility here in Louisville, and shipping hemp products all over the country. So it's been a remarkable 6 years.
Yeah,
Jeremy, you're getting an MBA.
I am getting an MBA. I can respect the pull to entrepreneurship, and especially never having a boss again. I feel that. I mean, I hope that Jay and I will never have to have a boss again. But look, I want to say everyone should read the book Cornbread Mafia. Read about the exploits of Johnny Boone. It's a great read. So if you're interested, read Jim's book. Jim, in the spirit of entrepreneurship, I just wanted to ask quickly before we move into the broader hemp discussion. As a journalist, as a professional journalist, what was the hardest part in taking the first step and actually launching the company? Like, was it wrapping your head around the business plan? Was it just taking that step? Was it, the bureaucracy of setting up a business? Like, walk us through that, because that's a hard transition to make.
Maybe the hardest. Like, journalism uniquely is like, in the training and the schooling part, are like, how to put this, the purest form of journalism has nothing to do with the business. Like, in order to be a great journalist, you have to never think about the business. Like, they beat in your head at Columbia J School, like you're not the ad sales guy. Like the ad sales should never dictate your reporting. Like, you go after the used car lot that advertises with the newspaper. Like, fuck that guy.
Right.
And so. But I grew up in an entrepreneurial family. My parents owned an independent grocery store, like an IGA. So for 40 years, my father and my mother, my parents, owned and operated a grocery store. So I grew up in a family that understood small business ethics and what that looked like. And I went off to be a writer and a journalist to get as far away from that shit as possible. I didn't want anything to do with it. But when this opportunity presented itself, I was like, well, shit, I got to. Like, it wasn't just like, I want to start a business. It was like, this is the next step of the progression of my career, my calling, and my vocation. Like, I am here to not just tell the story of Kentucky cannabis, but to engage in it and to provide, to create an economy for Kentucky farmers. I have this opportunity. I have to take it. It's an obligation more than it is an opportunity. And so I've really just approached it as that. Like, this is like, what do I have to learn next to do the next thing? And one of the skills as a journalist is just constantly digging in and learning the next thing. You don't have to be an expert. You have to find the expert. Like, go find the person who knows the thing and have that person tell you the thing. and then go check it out to make sure that person didn't tell you something that wasn't true. So, like in terms of the business plan and, generating, going out and getting an angel investor, like just these basic things are just like, let's just go and do it. And now, like, because I roped in our angel investor, now I'm in charge of fundraising. Okay, well, like literally what is a cap table? Like, did not know. Right, like did not know the term, what it meant, why it would be confusing.
I'm sure you do now, though.
Carta is like, where I spend more time than I want to. For our entrepreneurial friends, Carta is this platform for organizing investments and where investors are. And like starting the business, had no idea that shares of ownership would be a dynamic thing. It's like, well, you own this percentage of the company. That's the percentage of the company you own. Well, like, sure, yeah, but then you do a WeFunder campaign with 1,000 investors that all roll up into one line in an SPV. Like, what the fuck does that even mean?
You're like Richard Hendricks in Silicon Valley.
Oh my god! I watch Silicon Valley now, and it's like, oh, yep.
I get it.
Yep. I'm definitely like 75% Ehrlich.
Well,
and in this scenario, Eric, my partner, is Richard Hendricks. Like, it's just like every fucking time you turn around, it's like, really? Like, this is like this episode in Silicon Valley, like, like Jan the man and the sales team, like, just like so many things in Silicon Valley is just so real, like too real. Like, I made my wife turn it off a couple of weeks ago. Like, stop, I can't. This is too close.
This episode stands up, by the way. I just watched the first episode again, just cause, and I was like, when he sits down, it was actually about the cap table. He sits down with Gregory. He's like, "What do you want?" He's like, "Tell me about the cap table. How do you raise money? What's the?" No. You're the like. He's just. It's very much
right. Yeah, and like he has to have Jared come in from Hooli to explain all this stuff to him, like, and we went through all that shit, like literally on a call with a prospective investor who said, we want to see the cap table in the slide deck. I'm like, oh yeah, sure, no problem, and then hung up the phone. We're like, what the fuck is a cap table?
You need your own Jared.
Yeah, well, we didn't have our own Jared. We didn't have that. So,
I love it.
As the Ivy League trained individual on the team, I had to learn my shit. Like, I had to go and I have a degree from Brown. That degree is in poetry. Like, it is not helpful.
Is it really in poetry?
Yeah.
Oh, I love it.
It's in creative writing. It's in creative writing, but like it's not, it's not applicable to what we're doing now, except for I went to Brown. So like, that's great. But like, what did I learn there relevant to this? Nothing.
Yeah. Fair enough.
So, the entrepreneur journey is constant learning, constantly figuring out. Like, you can go to get a great MBA and have a lot of experience in understanding case studies and how things work. But until you're in scenarios that you have to creatively problem solve on the fly, like, we just dealt with this whole, we've got a problematic neighbor in our new spot, and dealing with problematic neighbor situations relative to them reporting us to metro government for bullshit and having to fend off inspectors that are just basically harassing complaints, and how that relates to planning and zoning and all that stuff. Nobody's learning planning and zoning code until you're forced to dig in to fend off some bullshit, and then you get real good at it real quick, and then call the people that to help out. It's a constant creative problem solving situation, and everything is a nut to crack. And if it was an easy nut to crack, it would have been cracked already, and other people would be doing it. And one of the advantages of being on the front end of a new industry is solving those problems ourselves for the first time, which is challenging on the front end. But it's like, when you solve a problem, especially on the front end of this industry, it's there's a lot of benefit to it.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, they certainly didn't teach me building and zoning codes and corporate finance my first year of an MBA. And so, we'll have to cross that bridge when we come to it. Jim, I want to talk about your advocacy work. You're on Capitol Hill. Hemp is obviously, as any viewer of the show knows, one of the biggest topics in the broader cannabis industry. I don't know. Can I say that? Is it the same? Is it not? What are you expecting out of hemp regulation going into first the lame duck period and second the second Trump administration? How are you wrapping your head
around that? Doing our best to wrap our heads around the coming new realities as quickly as possible. Hemp is defined as cannabis by Congress with a certain THC level. So hemp is cannabis as defined by Congress. Just, like if you're looking for, a as defined by, to be like, is hemp cannabis? Hemp is cannabis as defined by its THC content by Congress. We're one of the bills that we would like to see passed is Rand Paul's Hemp Act, which would raise the THC threshold in hemp from the 0.3% it is now to 1.0%, to give a lot more flexibility to the farming part of this process. The THC level is really arbitrary. On the farm side, the THC level, if it needs to be regulated, should be regulated in the finished product side, which we've kind of outgrown the Farm Bill as a vehicle for that, which gets me to your question about like lame duck and next year. So right now, the Farm Bill is 2 years behind schedule. It should have passed in a year and a half. It should have passed in 23. It passes every 5 years. So the 2014 Farm Bill should have been the 2013 Farm Bill. The 2018 Farm Bill was on time. It should be the 23 Farm Bill. It's now the 24 Farm Bill. It will be the 25 Farm Bill. There seems to be no appetite for passing the Farm Bill in the lame duck session. Democrats in the Senate might want to push a Farm Bill through, but it would have to have concurrence from the House, and there will be no appetite for the House to do that. So, no Farm Bill in the lame duck. The Farm Bill that passed out of committee in the House, as well as the Agricultural Appropriations Bill, included that Mary Miller amendment that would have recriminalized hemp with any THC, would have made a criminal out of me, and would have shut down this business. We feel like that amendment is dead and will not resurface. There's always the chance it becomes a zombie and bites us in the ankle. So we're mindful of that and monitoring to make sure that the Mary Miller amendment is dead and stays dead. But I think it surprised Republican leadership in House Ag Committee and House leadership overall as to how much pushback they received from their rank and file on the Republican side relative to Mary Miller amendment trying to ban hemp outright. So I do not think that we are at risk, that the acute risk that we felt earlier this year in the summer, that the Mary Miller amendment is a thing. I think we effectively lobbied Congress on the House side and the Senate side to ensure that our position and point of view was well understood, and that amendment that was a product of prohibitionist groups combining with MSOs in this unholy Baptist bootlegger coalition to screw hemp companies failed. So when we get around to writing another farm bill, I think the House side next year is going to have a lot of the same problems the House side has this Congress, which is they're going to have a razor thin majority, which, so de facto Republicans have the gavel, the Republicans will be in charge of the committees. But in order to get anything moved that's in any way partisan, it's going to require 100% of Republicans voting together. All the Democrats will oppose. And there's not a whole lot of things that 100% of Republican members of the House agree on. Right. So that is going to be a challenge. Like, obviously, their first priority in this next Congress will be to repass or reauthorize the Trump tax cuts from the last Trump administration. They will want to do that this Congress while they have majority in the House and a narrow majority in the Senate, because they could do that through budget reconciliation. And so that will be their first. That will be their first priority is tax cuts for corporations, which, like now that cornbread is profitable, maybe that benefits us in a tangential way. But as it relates to hemp specifically, I think that will be, not a high priority. And so it's going to be our job to elevate it as a priority and to make sure that we get a good farm bill out of the next Congress.
Yeah.
And then, on top of that, safer banking is out there. Is that going to pass this next Congress? Like today, as we speak, I'm not sure what time it happens, but the vote to replace Mitch McConnell as Senate, Republican leader, soon to be Senate Majority Leader, is happening today.
Right.
And so that's a secret ballot with all Senate Republicans. We'll see how that goes. The three choices we have in candidates for that position are sort of all not great in terms of their current positions on cannabis and hemp. But there's certainly, better choices there, but we won't really know what to expect from Senate leadership until that's done. We also won't know how Mitch McConnell behaves on this issue once he's freed from the burdens of leadership, because a lot of his opposition, I feel like, relative to safer banking and other things, where because he was leader, he had to catch the arrows that were fired at his members and be against stuff that his members were split on. And when he's freed from leadership, it's going to be, we'll have to see where he ends up on some of these things.
Right. Can you talk a little bit about what would effective hemp regulations look like in an idealistic state, right? Which we're not at, but you have to sort of work to something. So,
Sure.
So how could the industry be effectively regulated federally, and maybe with an eye towards, I think this question of fairness comes up across cannabis and hemp a lot right now, and it's a pretty charged issue. But
Sure.
What would that look like to you?
Well, I mean, look, let me just speak from cannabis operators are obviously frustrated of the unregulated nature of the hemp market.
Right.
But that frustration comes out sideways because it's not hemp companies, hemp operators like myself are asking Congress for regulations. We've been begging for them for 6 years. Our trade association, the U.S. Hemp Roundtable, is asking Congress for regulations. It's not like we're out here acting like we belong in an unregulated market and the overregulated cannabis market can go pound sand. That's not what we're trying to do at all. What we're trying to do is get these appropriate good regulations for us in the hemp space so that there's then some track laid. So when we get federal legalization for cannabis, there's a regulatory pathway to regulate that cannabis product at a federal level in a way that cannabis operators don't have to go through the 6+ year struggle that we've been going through on the hemp side, because we have laid some track. So the most effective outlook for how to regulate cannabinoid products writ large, whether that's legal hemp or soon to be legal cannabis, is through this bill that Senator Ron Wyden from Oregon has introduced. It does not have a catchy title, but the Wyden bill would mandate basic simple things: third-party lab tests, 21 and over to purchase, and some basic federal labeling requirements that would be universal across all states, so that there's not this patchwork of regulations, not just state to state, but on everything from whether it's legal or not to milligram caps to but the packaging and the warning label state to state are different. And it's just it makes it impossible to operate if you're, these products are small. We only have so much packaging. There's only so much room for warning statements. So you're making those packaging requirements uniform at a federal level would be a huge step in the right direction. Third-party lab tests are basics or table stakes, sort of like obviously there needs to be third-party lab tests. Good operators like us do that as a matter of course, but because we're not in a regulated industry, it's certainly not the case across the board. So the first is establishing some fundamentals like that, and then empowering which federal agency do we want to do this work. And this is the least fun part of this, because no one wants it to be the FDA, and also it has to be the FDA. So the Wyden bill envisions standing up a Center for Cannabinoid Products at FDA, which is slightly different than, say, the Cory Booker COAO or CAOA bill that would stand up a center for cannabis products. A center for cannabinoid products would start that pathway with legal, federally legal cannabinoid product, which is currently only hemp, but it would be the same pathway for federally legal cannabis when we get there. So, that's where our advocacy work would be going in the next Congress, is educating the relevant members of the relevant committees that the Wyden bill regulates the end product that protects consumers, protects farmers, protects small businesses, and create some consistency across the board so that we can move on and not have to deal with this every day anymore.
Is there, this question sort of just occurred to me now, but is there a world in which the next version of the Farm Bill, given Republican control, is there a world in which they just regulate cannabis through that, or is that pie in the sky thinking? Maybe just changing the definition, basically.
Right. I have two answers to this question. Answer one is, from the hemp product side, we have outgrown the Farm Bill as a vehicle for effective legislation. Like, what we need is regulations for the end product, and that is not something that the Farm Bill is capable of doing. The Farm Bill regulates the commodity in the field. So the Wyden bill has been sent to the Senate Help Committee and to the House Energy and Commerce Committee, and those are the committees that are going to regulate finished product. On the field side, the commodity side, as an agricultural product, the answer is absolutely yes. That the entire prohibition of cannabis exists in one line in the Farm Bill that designates hemp as being cannabis with a THC limit of currently 0.3%. You raise that to 1%, as Rand Paul's bill wants to do, then you get it to 1%. You raise it to 5%, it's 5%. You eliminate it, it's gone. And then the trade-off is everyone in the industry has to start referring to it as hemp instead of cannabis, and it's legal. And if that's the trade-off that we want to make, then I think most people will take that. So yeah, the entire prohibition of cannabis is in one line of the Farm Bill.
Yeah. We're talking about things that might happen in 2025, what the regulations might say, what the federal government might do. But this is an industry, certainly in the hemp side of things, the ship is largely sailed, and you're trying to reel things back in. Like if that was the case, if people wanted to regulate hemp much more strictly, they'd have to reel it back in. Think about places like Minnesota, where you can buy, hemp-derived beverages. Well, not only at a brewery, but actually on tap at a brewery. That's the latest, right? So is it your sense, and this is more sort of bigger picture, that there's no genie to put back, you can't put the genie back in the bottle, but also the folks in DC are so far behind where consumers are already. How do you square that circle that consumers are already there, making their own decisions, choosing products they want and like?
I mean, I feel this question a lot. It's already trains left the station, genie's out of the bottle, metaphors.
Right.
And
Pied Piper's already walked on.
Yeah. The scenario I come back to is, do you remember Full Tilt Poker? Do you remember when internet poker was a thing that people did for money, and it was a thing? And then one day it was gone.
Yeah.
It was gone and people lost their shit. I do not want to follow the internet poker paradigm of being perfectly totally legal and then gone the next day.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And it's despite the fact that it feels like the train has left the station and there's billions of dollars in this industry, and millions of customers in America, including people with agency who are in touch with their members of Congress. It could all go away. It could all go away. So I am not one to rest on some sort of, this is just this is a given now, and we just have to tighten it up and make it better. We're playing defense as often as we're playing offense, and stuff in California is no good. And if the California stuff, if Gavin Newsom's California hemp ban stands and becomes, a leading indicator at the state level, that's no good. But at the same time, Gavin Newsom and his hemp ban in California gives us some fuel to the fire in DC, because what we have needed, nothing happens in DC without a crisis, because there's too many priorities otherwise. Like no one's going out of their way to help someone who's doing just fine. They just need something better, because there's hair on fire emergencies at every turn, and staffers who run these offices are all in their mid-20s, early 30s, and they're just like running interference for their bosses to try to figure out what's the one thing that they have to think about today outside of how they're voting. So the Mary Miller Amendment created a crisis for us, which was good in order to sort of focus the attention of staffers and members. But even with the crisis, it didn't quite have a villain. Mary Miller didn't quite qualify because no one knew who she was. But Gavin Newsom is a good villain. And the line that I've been sharing with my friends in the Kentucky congressional delegation is, if you want Gavin Newsom to dictate to Kentucky farmers how much hemp they're allowed to grow, then keep doing nothing, because that's where this is going.
My sense is that would work. It's a pretty powerful line. See, the poetry degree did come in handy.
The poetry degree sometimes comes in handy. So Gavin Newsom is an effective foil and villain for the Republicans that we need to convince that it needs to move forward, because in a vacuum, Gavin Newsom wins.
On the question of state bans, right? Like, do you think that the Newsom strategy is going to be an effective one in terms of other states copying it? Like New Jersey seems to have wanted to try. It's been in fits and starts. Like other states are looking at it. Do you think they're waiting to see whether Newsom's ban holds up in court, or like what is preventing other states that want to do this from doing this right now?
Well, I mean, it's the trend across the board. It's just like, Newsom just sort of stepped in the spotlight on it because this strategy failed in the California legislature. And when it failed, then Newsom came over off the top rope with emergency regulations to impose the ban that the legislation would have imposed but failed. This similar bans have failed in Illinois. The one in New Jersey was rolled back by a federal judge. There's weird stuff that's going on in Florida where hemp companies are plotted against recreational legal companies and Trulieve, and this constitutional amendment that failed with 57% of the vote complicates all that. But Newsom isn't like the actor. He's not the first to institute this ban. It was a trend, like the Mary Miller trend, like the U.S. Cannabis Council and MSOs were as aligned with the Mary Miller ban as Sam and Kevin Sabet and that crew. So it's not new that cannabis operators have been trying to shut us down. It's just Gavin Newsom is just the face of it, has become the face of it.
Jim, I want to be cognizant of our time, and I don't want to take your whole day because you're busier than us.
I'm having a very good time.
Oh, we're having a great time. We could do this all day, and I want to get your promise that we could do it again and even dive deeper into sort of Cornbread Hemp and the business operations, and aside from not nosy neighbors, but loud neighbors that you have there, the new facility. We could even talk about the mosaics behind your head. If people thought that was an actual thing, it's actually mosaics behind Jim's head. We got a close-up look earlier before we came on, but I really appreciate your time, energy, advocacy, knowledge, and insight, because it's been a great conversation this morning, and hope we can do it again really soon.
Thanks. I really appreciate it. Like, this is, spending time to connect with folks. Like, we're so heads down so much. Like, this is like, talking to you guys is really important, because as a member of the hemp industry, like, we can be seen as sort of second class citizens, or the dumb cousin to the larger, greater cannabis industry, and we don't feel that way. We feel like we're aligned on priorities and legislation and where we're going, and we want to make sure that cannabis folks know that despite the heat that we're taking from cannabis, we feel aligned with the priorities of the cannabis industry, especially in DC, and want to make sure that we continue finding productive ways to work together so that we don't turn around and find that we're working against one another. So any opportunity we have to share that message and talk to folks is one that we'll definitely take.
Amazing. Well, we'll give you more platform to do that because we like talking to you.
Yeah.
On behalf of Jeremy and myself and the whole Cultivated team, Jim, thanks for joining us here today. We look forward to connecting with you. Twitter as well, or X. You'll find out who we got coming on. We'll announce it later today because it's going to be a good one. Jim, thanks so much. We'll talk to you soon.
Jay, Jeremy, thanks for having me.
Thanks, Jim.